It's well traveled on this show. I'm a Shanahan fan. I don't hide from that. It's sort of interesting if I turn the spotlight on myself. Like, why does Nick Sirianni bother me so much? All right. Well, part of it is he's the coach of the Eagles. Like, I'm not stupid enough to not admit that. Part of it is he's the coach of the Eagles. And the Eagles and Niners kind of have a thing. We've had a thing the last few years. And so that's a very big part of it. I'll admit that bias. Hello?
Yep.
Sure. However, whether it be Sean McVay or Pete Carroll, who, by the way, if you're of a certain age 49er fan, Pete Carroll used to be one of us. We loved Pete Carroll. And then I covered Pete Carroll for years when he was at USC. Director of Sports, Lucas Alexander, very excited about that fact. I covered those teams. I got to know Pete. Pete was very, very good to me.
Totally, Grandy. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, not like we didn't have dinner together, but Pete and I had some conversations. Pete was great. And then he chewed gum and went to my rival. Bleep you, Pete. There's something about that thing on the sideline. To me, that's the best way I can describe it. When I see a leader of other people who go do the work, then the leader tries to make it about them. That bothers me.
I wonder if it bothered you when Jim Harbaugh was the Niner coach, because Jim Harbaugh is that guy. And the what's your deal with Jim Schwartz and the handshake gate.
That was with Pete.
Right, and the handshake with Schwartz. He shook his hand, he slapped him on the back and kind of pushed him away.
Harbaugh's a weirdo.
Harbaugh made it about himself, and ultimately that led to his own demise and his own ouster. So I wonder if you can think about Mark Willard in the early 2010s and the early 20aughts when he was your guy, Niner fan. How did you feel about him then? Yeah, Willard.
Well,
Sorry, that was too much. Yeah. Too heavy-handed.
Sorry. No, I never felt like as a fan that connected, not nearly as connected, I should say, as to a Shanahan, a Bill Walsh, like the other most successful 49er head coaches in the past. Certainly I loved that the 49ers got a lot better, and then they got a lot worse. And I was always like partially amused and partially confused by him. And then let me also admit, I didn't cover that particular team. So I wasn't as close to it as like what we do now. But he's a weirdo. The Jim Schwartz thing was odd. The funniest thing that never gets remembered to me about Jim Harbaugh was that press conference he held during the Alex Smith, Colin Kaepernick thing. That was when he lost me. When you have a press conference, and for those who don't remember, because this is a long time ago now, where Kaepernick had come in for the injured Alex, and he was slinging it, man. He was playing. And it got to a point where Alex got healthy, and Jim had to pick a quarterback. And he held a press conference, and everyone knew this was going to be the announcement. Who's starting this week? They're both healthy. And Jim goes, we're going to go with Colin and Alex. We're going to go with Colin and Alex because Alex is on our football team too. And I was just like, dude, you're just weird. And I'll admit to you also, because of proximity, I was not aware of how much Jim rubbed people in the building the wrong way.
Right.
And so there's a lot of Sirianni in Harbaugh.
For sure.
Spoiler alert, the Chargers will be better.
Right.
And then they will hate Jim.
Exactly.
Within 5 years.
It's a 5-year shelf life.
Yes.
And he lasted longer than that in Michigan, and he left a trail of despair and sanctions that he would have to face if he ever made it back to college. So, yeah, he's more than just a weirdo. He lives outside the lines, and just everything he did here, from, demanding that he had his own bathroom built in the coach's office to alienating the owner and all the rest of it. But it's something about Sirianni. Also, it bothers me, and maybe for me, it's the fact that he is the Philadelphia Eagles head coach, because my default among sports fandom is to root against Philadelphia in all ways.
No
and
matter
that's
what.
The Sixers, and that's the Phillies, and the Eagles. And even if the Flyers happen to make the Stanley Cup playoffs, I don't pay a lot of attention to hockey, but if Philadelphia has a good team, I hope the Rangers beat them or the Lightning or any other team in the Eastern Conference in hockey. I'm just down on Philly sports fan. I love when they get angry. We have Howard Eskin on our show occasionally, and he is the epitome of the Philly sports fan. And I'm sure Philly Sports Talk today, they're burying this guy.
God.
It's got to be an absolute inferno.
That was absolutely a hot mess. And the crowd was stunned.
Yep.
Silent. And again, for anybody who had anything go wrong with their fantasy or their bets or whatever in that game, I'm one of you. I feel for you, but I totally was able to recover because it was the Eagles and Nick Sirianni. And I'm like, that makes me just happy.
Right.
That's just a happy moment. I'm like, Nick's not happy, so I'm happy. Like, you deserve that. You deserve that. And Saquon, I love Saquon Barkley, and Saquon handled it the way you'd love to see a real leader handle it. The only time you make it about you is when it's wrong, not when it's right. That's another key piece to this. How did Fred Warner handle it the other day when they asked him about a 97-yard reception to Justin Jefferson? Fred's not looking at the DCs, not looking at the DBs. He goes, I was supposed to get home with the quarterback, and I didn't. So that's on me. Even though all of us know, dude, it's not on you. But that's leadership. That's leadership. If that play had gone well, what would Fred have said? Well, DC's put me in a wonderful position, and the other guys took up a couple blockers, and so I was able to cook. How many years now has Fred Warner said that he's able to play as well as he does because of the presence of Dre Greenlaw? Well, now there's no Dre Greenlaw. How's Fred look?
Yeah.
How's he doing without
Pretty
Dre?
damn good, yep.
He's the best player in the damn game.
Right.
So it is Fred, but his leadership style will never point the positive spotlight on himself. And that's what Sirianni does that drives me nuts, especially because he didn't even have a helmet.
Exactly. And that's where I would default to Shanahan, because when things don't go right, he doesn't usually or almost ever point the finger at, the players who didn't make a play or the officials who didn't make the right call. It's about the team. It's about we didn't execute, and, the offensive line or his calls or his scheme. He doesn't often point the finger elsewhere than to the overall team unit. And I love that about a head coach. It's leadership.
I'm looking at a whole board of all the NFL teams just to jog my memory of all the coaches.
Yep.
And I'm trying to think, is there any other coach that I would argue in the NFL, when a play goes well, makes it about him? I think McVay did it once, but I think he learned his lesson. You don't see him run into the end zone and jump on people's shoulders anymore.
Right.
So that's good. And by the way, I don't mind personality, okay? How about McDaniel in Miami? We love Mike. Mike's a wackadoodle. He's hilarious. He always looks like he's coming out of, he looks like Bradley Cooper in the movie The Hangover. Like he's got those shades on. Always looks like he was out till 3 a.m.
And the hair has grown out now, too. It's
tremendous.
a little wild.
I love Mike, but Mike's not over here going, whenever Tyreek Hill scores, do you see Mike doing somersaults on the sideline? No. Turn around, walk away, get ready for the next play. I don't need you to fit into a box. But to me, that's leadership, especially in football. These dudes' bodies are on the line. They go out there and make a play. Let them go dance in the end zone. Let them have that moment. They're the ones that are doing the blood, sweat, and tears. And you'll get your credit. You'll get your credit. But that to me is a very, very big thing in leadership. If it goes well, push everybody else around you forward. If it goes bad, shove them behind you.
Exactly.
That's the way to do it, and Nick does the opposite.
Right, and I think because of that, that's partly why there is definitely a divide between he and not only the fan base, but maybe the starting quarterback as well. And you heard rumors from last year that they were not on the same page, Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, and you have a game like last night, and that's a classic time where the head coach should step up and say, I probably should have run the ball. I put Saquon in a tough spot, and Jalen Hurts, I put them in a difficult situation where, if we do complete that, we're probably going to win the game. But, looking back at it, I probably should have run the ball, and, a little humility and a little ownership. is what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And so let's take that to things that we've seen from Kyle Shanahan through the years. Let's go back to last year in Minnesota. And I've always described what he did with Steve Wilks in that game as simply a surprise. I found it to be very surprising. I thought it was telling. This is no criticism of Steve Wilks. It was more a moment where I went, oh, something's wrong in that relationship. But I can also say this. If Kyle were really being an awesome leader in that moment, he wouldn't have said it that way. Because, again, what do you do as a leader when things don't go well? You take all your people and you shove them behind your back. And you stick your chest out and you take the bullet for them. That's what you're supposed to do. Because you get paid the most, you have the word head in front of the name coach. And so you're the guy. And that's the way it works. And it's fair and unfair. We know this. Coaches get wins and losses. Quarterbacks get wins and losses. Nobody else gets wins and losses.
Right.
Nobody else. So, but that's the way it works. And so we miss the context sometime, and that's fine. But yeah, I don't love it when the leader of the football team does a press conference to be like, so the other people all know that they messed up. I don't know. Did you not hear,
Well, we had that last year from Shanahan.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
What he did in Minnesota. That's not good.
It's not good, but it was pretty obvious. And, this year you had the same thing in Minnesota, and we can play the Brian Baldinger cut on the way he broke down the 97-yard touchdown reception from Justin Jefferson.
Got it right here.
If it was last year or if it was Steve Wilks as the coordinator, I wonder if Kyle would respond differently, because for me, last year the zero blitz at the end of the half, and Mooney Ward tried to get the pick and he didn't. They scored a touchdown and that turned the game. This one's not too dissimilar in that it was a devastating play.
Totally.
And the defensive coordinator might have messed up with the way he schemed it.
Listen, I'll admit, sort of our layman's weakness, which is that I always say, we're just sitting on a couch with bad food in front of us.
Right.
I don't know how this whole thing, every single piece of how the play call comes together. I understand that on defense, that's the defensive coordinator's responsibility. I get that. And so I'm not saying on the sideline, Kyle should have run up a flight of stairs the same way he did when Brandon Ayuk was about to get traded and be like, Steve, stop. Sounds like a terrible play call. Let's do something. No, dude, you've got 30 seconds. I understand that other people on the sideline do have responsibility. But I also wonder if Kyle Shanahan, if he was given that press conference again, might choose his words a little bit differently. Look, we got caught in a play call there that I didn't like, and we don't really feel, looking back on it, like it was the right thing. That was unfortunate, and we as a coaching staff have had that conversation, and we will try to not be making that mistake in the future. That would land so differently with people, even if that makes Kyle's skin crawl. I get it. Even if it makes your skin crawl, because maybe, Kyle, you had nothing to do with it. But you have the word head in front of the word coach. That's the way you do it. I think that's the way you try to do it.
You should. Or if you're going to do what you did last year, then that normally would portend to where that person's going to be replaced and removed immediately, not at the end of the year. So when you say that, and he knows he can't do that, wow, that was pretty scathing. And yet Steve Wilks was able to coach through the rest of the year, and then he got fired about 9 minutes after the Super Bowl ended.
Right, and even though some of the games still looked really good, their defense looked amazing in Jacksonville after the bye. Yeah. It looked great in the Super Bowl for the majority of it.
Kyle learned his lesson coming off of Sunday's game, where you had another situation where you blitzed and you had two safeties deep. You had two of your corners who were not guarding their best player. That feels to me like a schematic breakdown.
Well, you referenced what Baldy, who was great this morning on the Morning Roast, you referenced what he said about that play. I referenced yesterday that Richard Sherman came down on the defensive coordinators, Nick Sorensen, Brandon Staley. What are you guys doing? What was that setup? You can't put your safeties in that position with the best wide receiver in the league. Baldy seems to agree.
I don't know what they're thinking. Diamador Lenore's on the other side of the field guarding grass. Like there's nothing over there. There's no work. You got Naylor and Jefferson over here in a stack. Sometimes you can, I don't know why you would drop down your backup safety in that situation. Him and Tago, the safety's in the play, and Odom is down there. If you're going to play that stack, at least put Travarius on Justin right there and let Ward take Naylor. At least put your best corner on their best receiver in that situation. And so not only did they get caught with their second corner on the other side of the field, but they got caught with, their third safety on Jefferson like that. And that's, Sam saw that all the way. I think he saw it pre-snap, actually. And the biggest play that I've seen the 49ers give up since Shanahan has been there, happened on the play.
Yeah. Obviously, looking back on this, in the moment, you're just frustrated. You can't believe that it plays out that way. But the more sort of NFL people I listen to, this was set up very, very incorrectly. And they tried to blitz, and I think that they thought that would handle it. And once again, like all game long, the Vikings offensive line won this football game. They were incredible. They won the game. Yeah. I know Nick was okay, but the Viking offensive line won that football game.
Yeah, I thought Nick was great. And he had 2 sacks, and he had another pressure. And Floyd, I don't believe he recorded a tackle. And your guy, Javon Hargrave, in the middle, who's supposed to be a great pass rusher in the interior, he's not doing anything.
He's not good.
I would excuse Nick Bosa from this criticism because I thought that he was really good. He was disruptive, but he didn't get any help in the pass rush. And that 97-yard touchdown drive, or touchdown throw, rather, was one of only 4 times they blitzed. So Nick Sorensen and his defensive approach was, we're just going to rush 4, and that's going to be good enough, and it wasn't good enough. And they got beaten in the run game, and Sam Darnold was mostly unpressured in the game. So I wonder if going forward in this next game here against the Rams, without 2 of their top wide receivers, if they try to heat up Matthew Stafford a little bit, because they didn't do that to Sam Darnold. They made it too easy on him.
Well, this is what I look for. When people sort of wonder, okay, why are you a fan of this coach? Why are you not a fan of that coach? And maybe this is like the training through the years of watching Steve Kerr coach the Warriors, the training of when I was in LA watching Phil Jackson coach the Lakers. Does it mean that schematically they're perfect? Of course not. Of course not. Steve Kerr's rotations coming up soon on 95.7 The Game.
Right.
We're only a couple months away. But it doesn't mean that they're schematically perfect. The number one thing I look for in a coach that we can see from the outside is togetherness. Steiny was making the point, well, people have been frustrated with Kyle before. Nobody's ever free from frustration. It's football. It's emotional. You ever worked at a restaurant? Everybody's screaming at each other all the time in the back. And this is football. This is 18 times as emotional and 1 billion times more physical. So sure, people are going to be frustrated. But what I've loved about the Kyle Shanahan era is that the Niners usually look together. They're buttoned up most of the time. And if there's a concern I have right now with what I see, it's not that Christian and Debo are going to be out. It's that the defensive coordinators have been caught again in Minnesota, letting people get over the top, number one. And Charvarius Ward, after 2 games, is already speaking into microphones going like, well, I would rather play this way, but that's not the game plan the coaches are giving me.
Yeah.
We're 2 games in.
2 games.
To a new defensive regime.
Right.
And you got a loss. You got a corner saying he'd do it a different way, and the entire NFL media being like, what the hell were you doing?
Yeah. And you
look good.
Not good at all. And you look at what this team has been over virtually every year, and it's been a new defensive coordinator almost every year. You have Sorensen, you had Steve Wilkes, you had DeMeco Ryans, you had Robert Saleh. And I know that it's good that these guys are going out and getting head coaching jobs. That means that they're good coaches and that they deserve their promotion to be head coaches. But you're going year after year with a new defensive coordinator, and so far, it's not really working. I'm just looking at the numbers, and they are second to last in blitz percentage. They've only blitzed 6 times in 2 games, 9.5% of dropbacks. Their pressure rate is toward the bottom of the league. Their sack numbers toward the bottom of the league. And I know it's a small sample, just 2 games in, but you saw it on Sunday. You didn't heat up Sam Darnold at all, really. And other than Nick Bosa, you had no heat on him.
You said 6 blitzes the whole season?
According to Pro Football Reference.
And one of them ended with a Justin Jefferson gritty.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. A gritty, a 97-yard gritty.
A 97-yard gritty.
Super gritty.
I was surprised he had the energy left to do the gritty after that. That's tiring.
That is. The Falcons have blitzed 4 times in 2 games. The Niners have blitzed 6 times in 2 games, according to ProFootballReference.com.
Huh.
Meanwhile, Minnesota, your leading blitz team, they've blitzed 33 times, Mark. 33 out of 78 pass attempts, they've blitzed. So you saw it on Sunday where Minnesota's bringing 5, they're bringing 6, and they're bringing them from all different angles. And I know every defense is not the same, and the Niners are more a team that is just going to rush 4 and trust the other 7. But I'd like to see them mix it up a little bit and maybe bring a little bit more heat at times.
There's only 2 good things that happened with that Kirk Cousins drive last night. One is the Sirianni was upset. That's number one.
Well, I know a couple other ones.
Number 2 is I was sitting there going, dude, Saquon drops the ball, and that turns into a 6-point Eagles lead instead of a 3-point Eagles lead, and Fade the Dibbers had done Falcons plus 5.5.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I was chuckling a little bit. I'm like, oh, he's not going to be happy about this. This is a bad beat. Remember earlier you talked? I'm like, that wasn't a bad beat. This was a bad beat.
This would not have been a bad beat.
It would have been a bad beat. If Saquon catches the ball, the Eagles win by 3. Ball game over. And you would have won. And then they kick a field goal, and I'm like, oh, he's going to lose. And then he didn't lose.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Well, honestly,
on your win.
I don't think it would have been a bad beat because Philly deserved to win that game by 6. They should have kicked a field goal. They should have won by 6. They were in a prime position. And the beauty of it for me was in my pick'em pool where there's actual money involved. I had the Falcons plus 6.5. So deep down.
Oh, I thought they were 5.5.
5.5 was the real time, but the pool I'm in.
Now I'm even more upset.
The spreads come out on Tuesday. So I already have my sheet for the week, and those numbers don't change. So that spread actually went from 6.5 to 5.5. So Fade the Dibbers, whatever. I don't want to lose that because I'm proud to be a winner and I won again. But
that's not
for
good.
Me, in the money pool, I'm thinking go ahead and kick the field goal, Philly. I got 6.5.
I didn't know that.
Is winner.
That makes me more mad.
And the little cherry on top, Grandy.
No.
Oh, no. Yes. The L for Grandy.
Dude.
I'm going to call him Glandy.
I'm starting to feel bad for the guy.
Yeah.
I'm 0-2. You don't need to keep rubbing it in, okay?
I do.
And then remember last year in
also,
the playoffs?
the flip side of this is Steiny won. You can't be happy about that.
Yeah,
hurts me a little bit.
That's a good point that he just made there.
But his
point
team,
for Grandy.
His team's overrated.
Yeah.